tonight. What a wonderful gathering of beautiful people here tonight. And I hope you all are having a good time and enjoying yourself. And it's Friday night, Charlottesville at the Paramount. Great to be here. So this is an exciting night. I'm Marcus Martin, I'm Vice President.
When I saw the painting, Augusta, at the end of the day, is the poet worth the prose? The prose is worth
momentarily and his own personal remarks about our honoree, Rita Dove. Boyd Tinsley, a native of Charlottesville, is a violinist and mandolinist who has performed as a member of the Dave Matthews Band since 1991. Mr. Tinsley first began to play the violin in middle school when he mistakenly thought he would learn the guitar by joining the school orchestra. As a result, he learned to play the violin and quickly became proficient. As a teenager, he took part in forming the Charlottesville Albemarle Youth Orchestra. He later attended the University of Virginia and joined the Sigma Nu fraternity. He formed the Boyd Tinsley Trio in the early 1990s, releasing a solo album titled True Reflections in 2003, and wrote the short film Faces in the Mirror in 2012. Boyd appeared with Rita Dove at the Paramount Theater in 2009, when Rita launched her poetry book, Sonata Melodica. We're pleased to have him return once again. Now please join me in welcoming Mr. Boyd Tinsley.
That was an amazing film. It was beautiful and I love hearing you talk, Rita. It's like music. It's like your voice resonates. Your words are absolutely perfect. And I love that. And you said that when you were younger, you chose the cello to play music, and you just happened to choose the cello. Well, I just happened to choose the violin. We started in the same place, playing classical music, and we just happened to play these instruments. And you said that you had this choice to make in college, whether or not to play music or to be a poet. And you chose to be a poet. I chose to continue to play music. But you still were a musician, though. Your poetry, your words are musical. They speak music. And you've brought us so much pleasure over the years with your poetry, your plays, your prose, and you have become great. That little girl, that majorette, that cello player, from Akron, Ohio, changed the world through your words. I've got to, if you know me, I improvise. So I've got my iPhone here, which is like my sheet music, but I will still improvise around it. Rita has bestowed upon me, my God, I mean, they have all these lists of achievements that she's made, but still, that's about a tenth of the ones that she has that she's earned. You are an absolutely incredible woman. Did I see that you were the Glamour Woman of the Year
Yes, yes.
Oh my God. On top of all of that, that's absolutely amazing. And I was going to go down a list of all these things, but I think that everybody gets the idea of who you are and what you've achieved. I'm very honored to be up here today. I'm just a violin player from Charlottesville. Yeah, I play in this band, but you are a brilliant writer, a brilliant poet, and I'm absolutely humbled to have been asked to make some remarks about you tonight at this event. You've honored me a few other times as well, and it's very humbling. We did a music and poetry competition. Well, we judged it for young musicians and young poets in Charlottesville, along with Bruce Floor from Red Light Management. And I remember after one of them, you turned to me. They played I think they did the music and then they did the poetry. And I was there mostly for the music because that's what I would be most qualified to judge on. But you turned to me at the end and you said, which one of these poets do you like? And I was like, oh my God. I better not mess this up. So I saved myself by saying, you know, I have a couple of ideas, but what do you think? And I went with that. But she also honored me. I think I was like a schoolboy running home to show mom something really cool. And I did that too with my wife when Rita Dove put me in her book of poems in Sonata Melodica about George Bridgewater. And she in the introduction, I believe, was talking about a lot of black violinists. And oh my God, Rita Dove put my name in her book? That was one of the biggest honors of my life. And you also honored me by allowing me to come here and to read a section of that book of poems and prose and also a short play that's in that. It's great the way that you go about things. It's so free and it's flowing. And you always have this childlike excitement about what you're going to create next. All these things and all these awards and you know, being a professor, you would think that you would only be stuck behind a desk and a lot of books and that whatever you did would be work. But it's not. It's play for you. It's like you have fun. It's just like whatever you set out to do is like, okay, let's have fun right now. And it shows through your work. Rita called me to ask if I would do the reading for her book here. And at that same time, I had had this idea of making this movie called Faces in the Mirror. And this movie is interesting because Rita was talking about in the movie. She said that she would give directions to her house, but not directions from her house. And that really related to this film, and I understand that now, her excitement of being a part of this movie. Because I went to Rita and I said, Rita, I'm making a movie. And she said, what's it about? Well, I don't really know. We've got the beginning, and we've got elements of the middle. We don't know how it ends, and we're not quite sure how it goes and what it's about. And she said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. She wanted to find her way home without the directions. And that's what we did. And in this movie, we started with the music, which is completely backwards from movies. You have a script, you shoot the movie, you edit the movie, and then you put music to it. Well, we started backwards. We started with a little bit of a story. Then we did the music. Then we wrote the script. And then we shot it. But even as we were making the movie, it was like a living script. We were still writing parts of it. You know, we had like a sketch, but still, as we went along, we discovered the movie. And we didn't know what the movie was until the very end. And Rita loved this idea. I was so excited. I was so afraid to ask Rita to be a part of this. I mean, she's a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's like, we're making this movie and we don't even know what it's about, and I'm asking her to be a part of this. But when she said yes, that she would, and with the excitement that she had, you know, I knew that this dream of making this movie was going to become a reality. For one, I wasn't going to let Miss Dove down at all. As great as she was. And really, Rita, you have to understand that through the 3 years that we went through making the movie, that was one of the biggest sort of cattle prods, was that if you were involved in this movie, I was going to do what I could to make it the best movie that I could make. So you inspired it so much. And you also inspired the movie. You told us what, from the very beginning, you know, we didn't know what this movie was about, but I asked you to write a poem about this movie. And from the very beginning, you actually told us what this movie was all about. It took us 3 years to really materialize it, but you told us from the very beginning. We did this music, and you know, from that, the director, Aaron Farrington, the actors, Ryan Orr, the production company Filament, Ryan Gall, who's a producer, Fred Williams. It's a small group of us, but we all listened to the music for a few months. And that was the cue, because the movie was really based around emotion and feeling. The movie has music throughout the whole thing. And the idea was to dance the film with the music, that whatever you saw on screen, you heard in the music the same emotion, the same feeling. It sounded like it looked. And I wrote this violin piece. We're in the studio writing music for the movie. And I wrote this violin piece. It was like the very last day of the recording. I had a plane to make in about 3 hours. They were packing up the equipment and stuff, and my assistant was looking nervous because he wanted to make sure that we got to the plane on time. But I looked at the engineer and I said, I want to play. And this is like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was just inspired to play this piece. And I played it. And somehow I went to this world in music that I'd never gone to before and have never gone to since. And I played this piece completely from the heart, and I think that the place that I was at that time was a very sad place. When Rita heard this music, she said that's one of the saddest pieces of music I've ever heard. It happened to come from my place, from my heart, and that was the place I was in at that time. But Rita wrote a poem for this movie from that music. Like me, Rita likes to do creative things late at night in the wee hours. When I came up with the idea of this movie, it was 3 in the morning. I was just watching TV, and I was eating ice cream and donuts. And somehow I was inspired through that to do a movie. And she would spend time and she'd listen to this music at night, and she'd walk around and she'd feel what the music had to say. And she wrote this amazing poem, a poem that dances with the music. It's great because it's in the beginning of the movie, it begins with that. It's me on the violin and Rita with the words spoken with her voice. And it's like, my God, I get to do a duet with Rita Dove. And that's exactly what it was. I'm so glad that this is flowing because I didn't have anything written down. But I'm usually best when I just speak from the heart. I don't want to go on too much longer because so much of what I was going to say has been said already. I did want to just read for you the poem that she wrote from the music that I played. It was when I read it, I was like just stunned. I was like, oh my God, that's it. She just gave us the movie, and she gave us some of the most incredible music for the movie. Was her voice, and she sets the tone. And without Rita, the movie wouldn't make any sense really. She brings it all together. She tells us what it's about. And I'm going through my iPhone because I have all these notes and I have to figure out which one I have the poem in. So if you give me just a second, I see shopping list. Impossible to keep a landscape in your head. Try it. All you'll get is pieces. The sun emerging behind the mountain ridge, smoke coming off the ice on a thawing lake. It's as if our heads can't contain anything that vast. It just leaks out. You can be inside a house and still feel the rooms you're not in. The kitchen below, an attic above, the bedroom down the hall. But you can't hold on to the sensation of being both inside the walls and outside, looking at them at the same time. Where do we go with that? Where does that lead us? There are spaces for living and spaces for forgetting. Sometimes they're the same. The keyhole sees nothing. Has it always been blind? It's like a dream where a voice whispers, open your mouth, and you do. But it's not your mouth anymore, because now you're all throat, a tunnel skewered by air. So you rewind, and this time when you open wide, you're standing outside your skin, looking down at the damage, leaning in close, about to dive back into your body. And then you wake up. Someone once said there are no answers, just interesting questions. Which way down? Asked the dove, dropping the olive branch. If you think about it, everything's inside something else. Everything's an envelope, inside a package, in a case, and pain knows a way into every crevice. That's beautiful, Rita. And she expressed what I was playing. And I am so honored to be here to honor a fellow musician, a fellow artist. Thank you very much for reaching out to me, for making me feel special, because you're so much greater than I could ever imagine to be. And I'm very honored to be here. And thank you so much, Rita. I love you.
Thank you, Boyd Tinsley. Let's welcome Miss Rita Dove to the stage.
trying hard. Thank you, Boyd. That was really, really beautiful, and it was really an experience working on that film with Boyd. An adventure. One part of it I didn't like was when I got rained on that time, artificial rain in the middle of the movie. But the rest was great. And Eduardo, my man, thank you so much. We really had a journey, didn't we? It was again, an exploration when we went through the film together, and I really love it. I really do. And I thank you so much. Now you all know what my major red outfit looks like. It's beautiful. It is hard, though, to look at yourself on a screen and see yourself magnified, but I mean, I don't know. I'm only 5'4", and then, God. But it's a pleasure and it's an honor, and it's thrilling to be here and standing in the lobby, greeting and seeing so many of you. I was just really reminded of what a home this is, Charlottesville, and what a brilliant place it is to be and to live. It's so many friends here, and people I hope are going to be my friends from so many different parts of my life. I really wanted to start tonight. What's going to happen is that I'm going to read a few poems, not from the early part of my life, but what happened afterwards, right? after the film. And but I'll only read a few, and then we're going to have an on-stage interview with Chris Tilghman, my colleague, conducting the interview. I have no idea what he's going to say. That's the most exciting part of the evening for me. I thought that since my father figures so prominently in Eduardo's really beautiful film, that I would read some poems that dealt with all the generation of women in the tribe, all of those who were around baking the food and doing all these things, and filled their traditional roles without complaint. This poem is called The Sisters' Swan Song. We died one by one. Each plumper than the mirror saw us. We exited obligingly, rattling keychains and cocktail jewelry, rehearsing our ghostly encores. Glad to be rid of pin curls and prayers, bunions burning between ironed sheets, we sang our laments, praised God, and went our way quietly, or mourned in satin and chrysanthemums, whiskey and cake, old gossip evaporating into cautionary tales. Does it matter who went first, Corinna or Faye, heartache or coronary, a reckless scalpel or a careless life? Whoever was left kept count on the dwindling rosary. Susanna, Kit, Mary, Violet, Pearl. We all died of insignificance. That was bleak. Let me... Before I knew my mother, that is, before I was born, she worked 2 jobs to help my father go through college. And one was as a typist, and the other one was as a seamstress for a dress shop. My mother enters the workforce. The path to ABC Business School was paid for by a lucky sign. Alterations, qualified seamstress, inquire within. Tested on sleeves, hers never puckered. puffed or sleek, leg of mutton or raglan, they barely needed the damp cloth to steam them perfect. Those were the afternoons. Evenings she took in piecework, the treadle machine with its locomotive whir traveling the lit path of the needle through quicksand taffeta or velvet deep as a forest. And now, sang the treadle, I know. And then it was day again. All morning at the office machines, their clack and chatter, another journey, rougher, that would go on forever until she could break 100 words with no errors. And then no more postponed groceries and that blue pair of shoes. I'm still looking for a good blue pair of shoes. They're hard to find. And then there was Rosa Parks, one small, quiet woman who changed the world, really. Rosa. How she sat there, the time right inside a place so wrong, it was ready. That trim name with its dream of a bench to rest on, her sensible coat. Doing nothing was the doing, the clean flame of her gaze carved by a camera flash. How she stood up when they bent down to retrieve her purse. That courtesy. Thank you. You don't have to clap. I'm going to read one more from, the last two poems were from On the Bus with Rosa Parks, and I'll read one more from that, and then just a few more. I won't keep you up here for very long. But I've always wanted to read this poem in a group. And so I thought I'd try it out among my friends. I had the privilege of meeting Rosa Parks several times. The last time was near the end of her life, and it was at a movie premiere in Washington, D.C., and she was the guest of honor. And so it was hard to get close to her that last time. In the lobby of the Warner Theater, Washington, D.C., they positioned her, two attendants flanking the wheelchair, at the foot of the golden escalator just right of the movie director who had cajoled her to come. Elegant in a high-strung way, a twitch in his tux, he shoved half spectacles up the non-existent bridge of his nose. Not that he was using her to push his film, but it was only right, wasn't it, that she be wherever history was being made. After all, she was the true inspiration. She was living history. The audience descended in a cavalcade of murmuring sequence. She waited. She knew how to abide, to sit in cool contemplation of the expected. She had learned to travel a crowd bearing a smile we weren't sure we could bear to receive. It was so calm, a suturing. Scrolling earthward, buffed bronze in the reflected glow, we couldn't wait but leaned out to catch a glimpse and saw that the smile was not practiced at all. Real delight bloomed there. She was curious. She suffered our approach, the gush and coo, the babbling, the director bending down to meet the camera flash, until someone tried to touch her, and then the attendants pushed us back, gently. She nodded, lifted a hand as if to console us before letting it drop slowly to her lap, resting there. The idea of consolation soothing us, her gesture already become her touch. like the history she made for us, sitting there, waiting for the moment to take her. This one is for all of my friends in the dance communities here in Charlottesville. Some of who came tonight. The ballroom dancers, salsa dancers, Argentine tango dancers, they're out there. There's an underground Charlottesville, you really should check it out. Foxtrot Fridays. Thank the stars as a day each week to tuck in the grief, lift your pearls and stride, brush, stride, quick, quick with a heel ball toe. Smooth as Nat King Cole's slow satin smile, easy as taking one day at a time, one man and one woman, rib to rib, with no heartbreak in sight. Just the sweep of paradise and the space of a song to count all the wonders in it. It was really difficult to pull a poem from Sonata Melodica, which Boyd talked about, and he so eloquently read a poem when we introduced it here on this very stage a few years back. From the book, he read a poem from it. But it was really difficult to pull just one poem since it is a book-length sequence. And so I've taken the liberty of excerpting a section from a poem called Pulling the Organ Stops, which I've never read before aloud, I think, in front of an audience, because it's all about music. It's all about being inside of the organ. So I'm going to excerpt the last part of this poem, in which the great maestro Franz Joseph Haydn is playing the organ in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The year is 1791, and Haydn is speaking. Understand, all music is physical. Bassoons rattle bones, a violin tweedles, and like a tooth biting down on a sweet, pierces the brain. But the organ climbs into your chest, squeezing as it shudders, a great lung hauling its grief through the void until we can hear how profoundly the world has failed us. I'd like to end with two newish poems. I think one should always end with the stuff that's still cooking. This first one is from about a year back, or a year or so back. It takes its inspiration from my daughter, who when she was around 5 or 6, for some reason began to traipse around the house singing "Nobody Loves Me But the Spring Cricket." I have no idea where that came from. But here. The spring cricket considers the question of negritude. I was playing my tunes all by myself. I didn't know anybody else who could play along. Sure, the tunes were sad, but sweet too, and wouldn't come until the day gave out. You know that way the sky has of dangling her last bright wisps? That's when the ache would bloom inside until I couldn't wait. I knelt down to scrape myself clean and didn't care who heard. Then came the shouts and whistles, the roundup into jars, a clamber of legs. Now there were others, tumbled, clouded. I didn't know their names. We were a musical lantern. Children slept to our rasping sighs. And if now and then one of us shook free and sang as he climbed to the brim, he would always fall again, which made them laugh and clap their hands. At least then we knew what pleased them and where the brink was. Thank you. And lastly, this is a poem that I finished just last week. Lately I've been battling a bum knee. If you persist in dancing at my age, all I can say is bring on the ice packs. So I wanted to write about that pain. And as an extra challenge to the poem, well, anyone who's been a student of mine knows that each semester I give students a personalized writing assignment that I call a wild card, and they have irritating, near impossible guidelines for them to follow. So I thought if fair is only fair, I should give one to myself. My wild card challenge was each word in a line begins with the same letter. So for instance, the first line contains only words beginning with the letter O. The second uses words only beginning with the letter E, and so forth. I am a masochist. Okay, here we go. O to my right knee. O obstreperous one, ornery outside of ordinary protocols, paramilitary proby par excellence, every evidence you yield yells. No noise too tough to tackle, tears springing sudden salt when walking wrenches. Haranguer, hag, hanger-on, how much more maddening, insidious imperfection. Membranes matter-of-factly corroding, crazed cartilage calmly chipping away as another arduous ambulation begins, bone bruising bone. Leathery Lothario, lone laboring gladiator grappling, groveling for favor, fair weather forecaster, fickle friend, jive jiggy joint. Kindly keep kicking.
Now, in the film, you heard Rita mention starting at age 10, her love grew for the cello, and if she treated her right, meaning the cello, it would sing. So, in recognition of Rita's love for the cello, we are happy to have with us tonight cellist Faith Brown, a member of the Charlottesville High School Orchestra, ninth grader, accompanied on piano by Miss Laura Mulligan-Thomas, director of the Charlottesville High School Orchestra. And they will be making their way up here in just a Faith and Laura will be performing Laricinia by Camille Saint-Saëns.
Well, this is what everyone's really been waiting for, I think. Why hundreds of people come to a theater like this is basically to hear two English professors talk shop. So we'll try not to do that, but I have to start with that small joke and ask Rita to talk about teaching. Since, from Marcus's wonderful introduction, what is wonderful is we've seen Rita's travels, we've seen her honors, but when she's teaching here, we have her fullest attention and her students know it. So Rita, tell us about teaching and what that occupies, that part that occupies your life.
That's a dissertation of words, I guess, but what I teach, I get so excited. I get so excited at seeing people go off, seeing the students go off on their own roads and discovering things. And I guess it's because when I was a child, you know, and going to school, I really did bury myself in books, and I thought it was incredible that you could go anywhere in the world while sitting in a chair, and that you could actually write your own road if you were a writer. And so to be able to give some of that back, you know, to try to open up for my students, I just really love it. I get really into it, and I do tend not to write as much when I teach, but I wouldn't give it up for the world, because if I didn't teach, I probably wouldn't write.
Well, I just wanted to say that I also love the film, and I can see why for you it's a little daunting to see your face rather a bit large. But I would also wonder if for you the most generous, sweet, and intimate part of the movie are all those pictures of you as a child and growing up. And they never get old, do they? Looking at those, and how do you relate to those now?
No, they never get old. I mean, because I remember every single instance behind those pictures too, and whenever I saw myself today, I would kind of go wince and ooh, you know, because it just makes you feel self-conscious. But the old pictures, and Eduardo did such a fabulous job of weaving those old pictures in. So it wasn't like someone strapping you into a chair and saying, watch my home movies. You just, you know, instead, I really felt that you get a sense of the era, and they never grow old. They really don't.
I think one thing that's wonderful about it is you get a sense of the photographer, you get a sense of your father and mother behind it, capturing this with pride and showing it off finally. It's wonderful that he saved them all these years, I must say. I think another thing about the film, just to ask about, is Germany, and with Fred and your in-laws. You live a transatlantic life, and I wonder how that relationship to Europe continues to inform your work and your thinking.
I think when I first went to Germany the first time, and I mentioned it in the movie too, that it was the first time I realized that there was a world beyond my borders that regarded my world with different eyes. And it opened me up to different perspectives, that the way I looked at the world was not the only way that that world could be looked at. And I think that when I have to back up a little bit and say, you know, when Boyd was talking about how it was an accident that he started playing the violin, and that's the path that things happened in, and it was an accident that I started playing the cello. It was an accident that I started studying German too. I took German because there was a book on the bookshelf that was in German. It was a book of poems by Schiller, actually. And my father had bought it to teach himself German before he went to the war. This is the kind of man he was. He was that kind of term. He wanted to know the language of the enemy. And he had Italian books there, and he had the German book. And I couldn't read that book when I was a kid. So when I was given a choice of what language to take, because you always took a language if you wanted to go to college, you had to take. At our school, it was offered Spanish and French and German, and I took German because I wanted to read that book. this led me to my husband, Fred, thank God, who is German. Though I never thought that that Germany was going to be such a big part of my life. And I think that sense of in a certain way, stepping out of a section of your life and looking at it, by going abroad and then looking back at the States, or going even, dancing and then looking back at academia, or something like all of these things help make a rounder picture, actually, for me as a writer.
I wonder if we could go back to the music, which is such a theme for the evening and for you. I'd like to just talk to you about some of what you're looking for in the sounds and the affect and the performers in particular. Thomas Beulah is rarely seen without his mandolin, at least in the opening. As he comes north, he's like Orpheus and his lute. And George Bridgetower, the protagonist of Sonata Melodica, is a violinist. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that book. We've been talking about it, mentioning it, but tell us who he was and your impulse to write it.
You're talking about Sonata Melodica, and George Bridgetower was a mixed-race violinist born at the end of the 18th century, and he became a child prodigy and went on. He met Beethoven, and Beethoven was so impressed by his playing that he composed a sonata for him, and that sonata is the Kreutzer Sonata. Originally it was called the Bridgetower, and then they got an argument over a girl, as these things happen, but he just, momentarily surfaced, and then he just descended again, depths of history. And that point, well, two things fascinated me. First of all, that someone could go up and down like that and disappear completely. How could someone that Beethoven composed the sonata for, how could he not be known? Number one. Number two, what was it like to look out on the world as a mixed race person in the 18th, 19th centuries? Again, trying to get a different perspective. And so that was part of it. But it was also the music, because I think I really am obsessed, aren't I, with music. And not only, and poetry is a perfect vehicle for it, because poetry is, I think, more music than words. So the words are music, let's put it that way. If in a poem, if it's really a great poem, I think the words are music. And I am really obsessed with trying to capture what sensations music gives us. I once had a professor, actually a creative writing professor when I was in college, say that you can never describe music, so don't try. So of course I'm like, I'm doing it. I think I've been doing it ever since.
Do music and lyric poetry, do they spring from the same source? Are they scratching the same itch? Or are they quite different?
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's a rough
you
one.
said you didn't know what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, and well, you've asked two different questions. I mean, do they scratch the same itch, and do they spring from the same source? And I think that they sometimes they scratch the same itch, but in different ways. You know, some a fast itch or a slow itch. So they scratch in different ways, but they scratch the same itch. Now, do they spring from the same source? Yes, I think they do. They spring from the fact that true emotion is, there are no words for it. And it sounds, I did say it was masochistic, it sounds kind of odd to say I'm working with words, knowing that words can never express what those words are trying to express. But that's basically what poetry is. And music, then when you hear music in that kind of superverbal way, that way that you can sense what it's about, but it is beyond, no, not beyond, it is, deeper than language.
Yes, I think so. And how about performance? In the poem, The Performer, about Bridge Tower, there is a line, and this is from his point of view. He's describing, as I recall, he's describing playing the Kreutzer, playing the bridge, but it was called the Bridge Tower at the time. Imagine that as a poetic extension of self into this man's head, playing this piece. But Rita, you say, this is what it's like to be a flame, furious but without weight. And I'm wondering about performing. You love to perform, and many of us think your dance is moving on from the inspiration of it. What is the performer? What's that inspiration? What happens to perform music?
It's so interesting because if you saw me an hour before all of this started, you wouldn't have recognized. I was a nervous wreck. I'm always a nervous wreck. Before I do anything, I say, why am I doing this? I'm shy. I didn't even play the cello because I couldn't get out on the stage like Faith did. That was so gorgeous. And the Swan is really one of the most exposed pieces of beauty, I think, in music, and she did this beautifully. But there's a point when you realize it's not about you in performing. There's a point where you realize that it's about connecting, and everyone's going to ride that, whatever it is, poem, music, together. And when that happens as a performer, then you're fearless and weightless. And it's an incredible feeling.
Let's just move on to another feature of your work that's so notable, is that you're a storyteller. You're a fiction writer as well, have been, and a dramatist, of course. Several of your books are these grand arcs of experience in lyric scenes and lyric bits. Where does that come from, you as the storyteller? What is that impulse to want to posit so much of your work within the larger historical arc?
Well, the storytelling urge comes from family. It comes from aunts and uncles and grandmothers and all the cousins, thousands of cousins, who could tell good stories. And just getting together for barbecues, and there were always people who knew how to tell stories really well. And they were musical too. A good storyteller knows how to pace it and knows where to turn it. I think I really believe that there is very little difference between poetry, narrative, lyric, all of these terms, prose, drama. They're just different kinds of music and different kinds of pacing of words. A different way of riding the wave of the sound. Because I think even every good storyteller knows that at some point along the line, there's going to be a breath or a caught moment. And if you can get your audience or your listeners to breathe with you, you've got them. They're going to go with you. But I do love the idea that we like to travel along that line of a story. The feeling of riding that line being led to a conclusion that gives you a satisfying. That's what a storyteller does. And I like the sound of the storyteller's voice, the human voice that courses through the narrative. I do think, though, and maybe I'm going to feel that too much has been made about the difference between narrative and lyric. I think that narrative, and I've said this to students before, said, a narrative is, it tells a story, but it does have lyric moments in it. And lyric moment, a moment where you stop and you look around at the world and things stop. And a lyric, a shorter poem, I read a few shorter poems tonight, is only you step outside of the story. You're living your life, things are going on, and the lyric poet steps out for a moment. And all of that story is around her, but she's stopping for that moment to tell you something else. So it's just another way of turning and looking at it.
That was the English professor part.
Sorry.
I want to do a follow-up, Rita, but I'm not allowed to. I just wanted to finish with just a question about your father and about the August 28th, 1963. His desire to pack all of you in the car and drive that 800,000 miles. What do you think he was thinking? What for him?
I think that he thought that he wanted to be there, he wanted to go. But he wanted us to know it too. He wanted us to be there as well, even though we weren't allowed to march because that would be too dangerous. What he didn't do, and this is interesting, he did not tell us that. And you see it nowadays with modern family TV shows. The father's always saying, now children, you see we're going to go do this, that. No, he let us figure it out for ourselves. It took us, a lifetime, but no, it took us 10, 15 years to figure it out when we finally grew up. But I just remember driving down there, feeling that we were taking part in something important, but we were going to be on the sidelines, and he was going to do this. And watching and looking at everybody very closely to try to figure out why we were there, basically.
What did he tell you about it on the way home? How did he describe it?
He didn't say anything.
Oh, there's
He didn't say anything. No, he didn't.
No. Well, in The Performer, the poem I quoted from earlier, George Bridgetower, the toast to Vienna says, "If you could see me now, Father, you would cry." I suppose all of us want to make that happen, to make our mothers and fathers cry, and I'm sure your mother and your father cry at what you've accomplished. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're about to close, so thank you, Chris and Rita. This has been an extraordinary evening, and I'd like to thank all who took part in it. And I'd also like to acknowledge the support of VP and Chief Human Resources Officer Susan Karkeek, VP for Research Tom Skalak, Senior VP for University Advancement Barb Sweeney, Associate VP for Alumni and Parent Engagement Cindy Frederick, the Paramount Theater, Chris Ure, Jason Williams, Matthew Simon, and other staff. Indeed, the community and university have come together in dedication to the ideas of equality, civility, and mutual respect. So let us dedicate ourselves to these ideas, not just for the few weeks of the celebration in January, but for every day, every month, throughout each year. So I want to thank you all for being out here tonight. Your attendance made this program very, very special. There will be a book signing, books available to purchase on the bus with Rosa Parks, American Smooth, Mother Love, Penguin Anthology of 20th Century American Poetry. Selected poems includes Thomas and Beulah and Sonata Melodica. We need to give Rita a little time to get out the front, but Rita, thank you for being the great American poet that you are. You are a rose, and speaking of rose, Ziz. A little birdie told us that Rita likes multicolored flowers to match her fingernails.